Yeah, good. I feel very happy to connect with you, and I feel very happy to know you and tell about you to my audience.
Oh, excellent. How's Hyderabad today? I've actually been to Hyderabad before, you know. It's a few years ago went and visited Golconda and some other places around. So it was very nice to see Hyderabad out. A bit dark though.
Yes, it's night time here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can hear the cars as well. That brings back some memories.
Yeah. So how was Golconda and how was Hyderabad?
It was good. Yeah, we were visiting. I worked at a company. We were using a partner in Hyderabad called Value Labs. I think they probably everyone knows Value Labs in Hyderabad, big outsourcing company. And yeah, we came over to meet the team and kind of do some workshops and stuff, and had some nice trips around. Golconda was very interesting, really really good, and there was a good play out in the kind of an open air theatre thing as well, which a bit of history as well. So fun times.
So how was the you are connected only with the outsourcing company here or the government also, the local government?
No, no, it was my a previous job, so it was just the outsourcing company Value Labs. So that was 3 years ago now, so it's been a while.
Awesome. It's nice to know that you was into you know this place and you visited this place. So
Yeah,
amazing.
it's
So
good times.
great, man. So firstly, thank you very much for accepting my invitation and accepting to be on my show.
No problem.
So so I came to know that you have a podcast and you talk about project management, leadership, and uh, everything related to tech.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, product management, I'd say not so much project management, but obviously they're very often mixed up, and I think that's one of the most interesting things about being in product management. So I work in product management, lead a product team, and are very active in the product community. And yeah, the product management thing is an interesting kind of balancing act because, of course, there is some project management in product management because you have to kind of manage timelines and stuff like that. But at the same time, it's kind of a different, more of a strategic role. But yeah, so I set the podcast up about a year ago, just over a year, end of August last year. And it was really for me just a chance to, we're in the middle of a lockdown, pandemic lockdown. There was I'd just been on holiday. I'd had quite a hard time at work, with lots of stuff going on and lots of stress and lots of late nights. And I thought, I was on holiday and I'm like, I'd spent a week not working and I was like very deliberately not checking emails and very deliberately trying to switch off. And after all of that, I was like, hey, I should find a hobby, but it's a lockdown. What can I do in a lockdown? And for some reason, my get out of work hobby seemed to become, hey, let's start a podcast talking about things that I do at work. So it's not the cleverest decision in the world. It was pretty dumb, I guess, but it was, yeah, it's been a pretty interesting journey.
So can you name the podcast name?
Yes, of course. So the podcast is called One Night in Product. So my surname is Knight with a K. So it's like a little play on words with the kind of one night in joke, but also if you think about it hard enough, there's also a quite risky joke in there from some old video that came out a few years back, which I don't know how innocent your audience is, but yeah, no. So it's kind of a play on words, but also really kind of encapsulates because I guess for me as well, back in the when I started this out, I was like product management can be a very lonely career sometimes. Like when you're working in a company, when you're in a small product management team, you're not always in a situation where you feel like you're getting a lot of support. So looking back on it, you can think, well, one night in product is also somewhat of a statement on that as well. But really, a lot of it was just down to the play on words and the joke.
So night is part of your name and one
Yes,
night
Jason
in
Knight. Yeah.
product. One
Hmm.
one night one night in
Yeah, yeah,
product. Why
exactly.
this name and what made you to put this?
Well, so there was so like one night in anything is like just a thing. You have one night at the movies, one night at whatever else. There was a famous tape that came out a few years ago called One Night in Paris, which was, again, I don't know how innocent your listeners are or your viewers are, but that was definitely in my mind as well. Like, it's almost like a cheeky joke about a sex tape that came out 10, 15, 20 years ago. And just, because my surname Knight, sounds the same as night, as in nighttime, it just felt like a really cheeky, slightly juvenile joke. But at the same time, that's the sort of jokes I make, I guess. So I found I wanted to kind of capture a bit of attention as well, right? So, like, if you know this yourself, you're a content creator. There's so much content out there. There are so many people doing YouTube channels. There are so many people setting up podcasts and setting up TikToks and everything else. It's like you need to try and have something that, like, just makes people think, hang on a minute, what's that? And then maybe listen to it. So I don't know how well that worked, and how much of that was down to more guests and stuff, because of course nowadays, because it's been around for a year or so, like, getting guests, you're probably standing a lot more on the quality of your guests. But whether it was something that helped the podcast name stick out at the beginning, I guess it could have helped a little bit.
So how many episodes you done? And when you started this? And what was your
Yeah,
motivation and what is the reason why you wanted to start this and tell? And what do you want to
yeah,
tell?
yeah. Well, I'll tell you all of those things. So I'm actually going to be releasing episode 86 today. So it's been a lot. It turns out, actually, my initial worry about, like, well, will people talk to me? Turns out everyone will talk to you, because lots of people have a story to tell. People like talking about themselves. People like talking, especially about books or initiatives that they're trying to publicize as well. So it's actually quite easy to get people to appear. And the reason that I have more episodes than weeks, like, it's been running for maybe 60 weeks and I have 86 episodes. So I've had so much interest from time to time that I've felt the need to push out more episodes than, like, so maybe 2 episodes a week, because I I have this, like, have almost this obligation in my head to say, well, look, if I speak to someone, I don't want them to wait 6 months for the episode to come out. I want it to come out in a few weeks so that the discussion is still relevant, that they're still working at the place that they worked at when I talked to them, that the initiatives that they're talking about are still new and stuff like that. So I kind of my own worst enemy in a way, because I keep accepting people as soon as I can and pushing and trying to get people as soon as I can, because I really love having these conversations. And back to my motivation, I guess that's the point. It's like, I really enjoy talking about and sharing stories about product management, because I think it's it's a really poorly understood kind of trade or job, and so many people do it in so many different ways, and there are a lot of people suffering out there as well. I mean, not suffering in the true sense, but suffering in a job sense. There's a lot of people working in maybe suboptimal product management jobs or for suboptimal product management companies. And it felt for me, kind of, I had two possibilities here. One of which, of course, is to learn from people. So I can have chats with people, speak to people that are either have different experiences to me, maybe longer experience than me, or different perspectives. I can learn from them, but I can also share those stories with the rest of the product community and help to inspire them to do something too. And of course, actually, the third thing is you're also helping those people themselves, because in some cases, the people that I've spoken to have been maybe kind of new to content creation, kind of new to podcasts, and it's been helpful to help them to get their story out as well. So it's really ends up being like three things that you're doing at the same time, and it just feels like a really good thing to do for the community.
So you have done 80 plus episodes, and are you a project manager before? What is your
Yeah,
full-time job? Is this
yeah.
your
So my
full-time job?
yes, no, this is not this is not my full-time job. This is very much a cost center that I'm spending money on, and that's fine. I've got a good job. I work for a fintech company in the UK. I lead the product team there, and I, I don't need to get paid. And actually, one of the things that I've boldly said, and I don't know if this will last forever, but I've boldly said that I never want to take funding. I don't want to do advertising. I don't need that. I can afford to run this podcast. It's not that expensive. The guests are free. The hosting is cheap. I edit it all myself. The graphics and the music are all done. I don't have like a big, I don't need anything out of it. I don't need, for example, I'm not used doing this to sell something. Some people have podcasts and their goal is to say, well, this podcast is a way to advertise the thing that I do. like my magazine or my courses or whatever. It's like, this isn't any of that. This is very much an indie thing. My job is my job. I can do that in the daytime. I can do the podcasting in the evening. And it's really, I mean, I don't want to say that it's like some greater good thing, because of course that makes it sound like a thing that it maybe isn't, but it's definitely more than a hobby, because it takes a lot of time to do these things. And you'll know this for yourself from, again, producing content. But it's kind of somewhere in between being like a socially good thing, which probably is a little bit too much for it, and a hobby. So somewhere in between, where I'm just trying to have this outlet. And also, frankly, it's really good for networking as well. Like, I've met so many people through this, people that I've read their books, people who, authors and thought leaders that you see out, and like, they're kind enough to share their thoughts with me and have these discussions with me, which I think, why originally I was like, well, why would these people ever talk to me? But as again, it turns out people always love to talk about themselves, and they love to talk about their achievements, and they love to talk about their opinions, and that's been really amazing. But also, just on a general level, I've had so many great conversations and met so many people around the general product management community that I think it's been worth it for that alone.
So product management is one of the key factors and the important things in any industry, not in IT industry. So I'm sure you might have did research, and you might have a lot of knowledge regarding this. You might have experienced with a lot of people saying about this. So product management, how the product should be managed, and how it is done, and how to create a product which will connect with more people, and
Yeah.
how to create a quality and useful product.
Yeah, there's a lot there. I think ultimately the biggest thing that any product manager and product team should be doing, and this is something we talk about a lot with many of the guests in the episodes as well, is like, you need to be close to the people that are using your product, and you need to be having discussions with them all the time and asking them really good questions about what it is that they need. Not really what they need, but what they're trying to do. So, like, the worst question you can go up to a user or potential user, the worst question is to go up to them and say, hey, what thing do you want? Because they might not know what they want, or that what they want might not be the best way to solve the problem. What you really want to ask them is, what problem do you want to solve? And then you can then work with your teams to propose solutions to that problem that hopefully will solve that problem for enough people that you can make money out of it and have a sustainable business. Now, that you mentioned kind of ethics as well, which I think is very important. And there's been sort of stories in the news recently, of course, about Facebook, who are a long-term offender in this space. And there's also just sort of more kind of algorithmic stuff that's going on with a lot of platforms around kind of systematically penalizing, people that, non-white people, basically. There are a lot of things going on. There's a lot of kind of gender inequality as well, and just general stuff that maybe people don't pick up. And actually, another thing there is also disability as well. Like, so making sure that your products are consumable by people that don't have vision, good vision, or any vision, or like people that can't hear. Like, there are so many aspects to that, and some people will sit there in a kind of typical lean startup way and say, oh, well, we just have to kind of start small and we'll maybe add that later. The problem is they don't add that later, because of course they move on to something else. So then the question becomes, well, how much of that needs to be put in up front? And also, how many of those discussions that you're having with your potential users need to be with people that aren't just the default? So, like, it's easy to go and find 10 middle class, middle-aged white men to ask a question about a thing, and you'll get probably very similar answers, and then you'll go and build that thing. And probably the team building it will be predominantly slightly younger white men. And the biggest problem that you have with diversity and the ethics that kind of lead off of that is that you end up missing things, because you don't take things from the perspective of someone who maybe has a different opinion or different needs or different just a different state of mind. And you need to make sure that you ask people across a broad sweep of people, so that you're getting multiple diverse inputs. And ideally, you want to have as many diverse people in your team as well, so that you can actually spot things before they become a problem.
So I understood you. So you also mentioned diversity. So
Yes.
as a person who did a master's in software engineering and graduation in computer science and engineering, I know about tech products, software products. So the quality, all the things that you said is very important. So the diversity that you mentioned, is it possible for a developer or a creator or a company, the product manufacturing company, to manufacture or create a product which connects with all the country people for into all professions and who knows tech and who don't know tech.
I mean, it depends on the product, right? I mean, and it depends on who you're targeting and the use cases. I mean, in theory, yes, but you have to be very mindful of the fact that the only way to do that is to talk to people from all of those different backgrounds. So it'd be foolish, for example, for me here to, I don't know, build something or get something built that actually I won't even use this example. I'll use a real example from a guy I spoke to from Nigeria, and he was talking a lot about how many of the assumptions that maybe Western companies will make about the characteristics of their users or where or how people are going to use the products, they fall apart in Nigeria, where maybe people aren't able to pay because they're kind of living at a very low, they're living at kind of subsistence level. Maybe they don't have good electricity out in the villages. Maybe the use cases that they have just they just don't match. They're not the same. Now, does that mean that it's impossible to build a product that absolutely supports everyone? I mean, again, it's a challenge, right? And you have to decide who you want to support. But if you're deciding who you want to support, you shouldn't be deciding and excluding people based on things that are unfair. And I think that's the biggest challenge, is to try and make sure that when you are building products, that you're building them in a fair way. And I guess it's kind of fair enough that you might accidentally exclude people and then do something to fix that afterwards. It's certainly not fair enough to almost explicitly exclude people because you either didn't care about talking to them. Basically, it has to be an accident, otherwise it's not okay at all.
So you personally, what do you understood about the product management before coming into product management and after coming into product management?
Yeah, so I mean, my background before going into more product management was very much around sort of software development. So actually writing the code and building tools and building applications. And of course, product management, it's kind of always been there, but in the sense that like it's existed for longer than I've been working in it. But I guess my introduction was very much as I started to move up into more leadership positions within the technical side of the company that I was working for. You start to realize, of course, that it's not just about writing code. And there's nothing wrong with just writing code, but at the same time, if you want to work kind of with kind of zoom out a bit and kind of start to understand what and why and how the code and the output of that code is being used, you need to start getting away from that coding and start to actually talk to people. And some developers enjoy that as well. Don't get me wrong. I think one of the worst problems you can have in a company is if all of the developers are just sitting there typing all the time. There needs to be engagement with the business and kind of engagement with the product and the users of the product as well. But of course, if you want that to be your full-time job, then you need to move out and actually do something where you're not coding anymore. And that, to be honest, was a hard move. I used to enjoy coding. So to move out and just spend all of my time in meetings and talking to people and trying to work out what we should build, not how we should build it, is a change. And I certainly had to learn a lot along the way. And some of that came from, school of hard knocks, just understanding things and making mistakes and trying to not make those mistakes next time. That's a really valid way to learn. And it's not like there's really like a university of product management where you can just go in and get a 3-year bachelor's or master's in product management. Like, it's something that in many cases and many leading product management thought leaders will be people that kind of just came in through the back door. They maybe had a very similar background to me, kind of technical person going into a company, slowly moving across into a more of a market facing role, and then just doubling down on that. So that's kind of the way in, and you do learn a lot on the job, but you have to mix that up then with a lot of books and courses and meetups and just try and be open as much as possible to just learning from as many places as you can as possible. And that then helps to really round you out. There's kind of this idea that like there are probably all these different competencies that a product manager can have, technical, market, design, user interviews, whatever else that they have. Maybe strategy is a different one as well, if that's not covered by the others. And then it's almost like everyone has different bars, different heights of bar, depending on their background and what they're good at. And you want to try and make all those bars as high as possible if you can, unless you really want to specialize on one. So a lot of the learning is about trying to be as rounded as possible and being as good or good enough for all of those areas that you can be a really solid contributor. So there's a lot of learning.
So how you as a developer while working and while understanding the internal thing of the product helped you after coming outside the product, becoming a leader. So how was tell me about the difference in thinking and the perspective as a leader and the creator of the product.
Yeah, so one of the good things about coming from a development background is that you have a really good understanding of what software developers care about, what they find important, and some of the trade-offs that you might need to make when it comes to building technical products. I work in digital products. We build a SaaS platform. So like that's, I don't need to worry about physical manufacturing lines or, Wi-Fi enablement on planes or anything like that. All of my stuff is software. So having a good understanding of software and architecture, I think, is really important. And then that enables you to have really good conversations with the engineers. The flip side of that, of course, is that you aren't really supposed to be, as a product manager, defining how things are solved. And what I mean by that is I can't go up to my engineering manager and say, hey, right, I want you to use SQL Server instead of MongoDB, because that's not really my job anymore. It's their job to understand what the best technology is, and it's my job to really lay down what the requirements are that we want that technology to solve. So it's kind of interesting because certainly in the past, when I've worked with engineers, maybe I've gone too far in the engineering direction and maybe tried to get too involved in that because they're kind of my team, right? Like, as in they're my football club. I came from a development background, so I more naturally gravitate towards these people because it's easier to talk to them. The big learning for me over my career has been that whenever you end up going back to your team, back to your natural ground, you're starting to fail. And the reason that I say that is because you're then letting the other parts of the business, they're not getting as much attention, which I think is really important. There's this old diagram that everyone always shows of product management, like business and users and tech and product manager in the middle. And I think that it's very easy for that product manager to drift. Like, so maybe if they came from a marketing background, maybe they drift back towards the business side. Maybe if they're more from a sales background, they might go more to the customer side. And that's natural. Everyone has areas of strength, and mine definitely started out being technical. The big job for any good, effective product manager is to try and get or stay as close to the middle as possible and avoid staying too close to one.
So you already earned the knowledge about the product inside and what happens after creating it, uh, the sale and how the user feels about it. You know what inside and outside. So now you took another job, starting a podcast, trying to put your experience, trying to put your guest experience through your podcast. So tell me about your podcast. How many people are connecting with it, and how the response? What is the response that you are getting? Do you think that the people are able to understand the exact things that are happening while a product is managed?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the people that listen to the podcast are people that are working or are very aware of product management or potentially founders or entrepreneurs as well, because of course there's a lot of product management involved in founding a company that's building tech products anyway. And it's very common, for example, in a very small early startup for the kind of one of the founders to effectively be the product manager. because they didn't have one yet. They didn't hire one yet. So I think that the understandability is fairly high because the audience is the people in the audience are the people that are working in that industry already. I think engagement wise, yeah, sure. I mean, it's been a year now. It's always been going up. I get a few hundred listens per episode, which is, not Joe Rogan. It's not like the most important podcast in the world with the most listeners, but at the same time, it's doing okay. It's certainly like I get enough out of it and I see the numbers going in the right direction that I feel that it's worth doing. If I was getting 2 listeners per episode, I might start to doubt myself. But because the numbers are always going up and the average numbers are always going up, it feels worthwhile. And I get really good feedback from some people on, say, Twitter or on LinkedIn, to the primary social channels for the podcast. And people are always really, supportive. They think it's good. They like the effort. They like the kind of the engineering effort that goes into, like the sound engineering and the kind of production that I put into it, because I'm very particular about my production. I try to make it sound as good as possible and try and make it flow as well as possible. And a lot of people have commented on that, and people I think like the style of it. Now, again, would I like it to be bigger? 100%. Of course I would. I mean, everyone always wants more listeners or more viewers, right? Because of course they do. But at the same time, it's definitely got enough engagement that I'm feeling that it's worthwhile. And again, I don't want to make money out of it. I'm not looking to sell a thing based off of it. I've got no book or course or anything to sell. So the raw numbers aren't the most important metric, but I'm definitely getting a lot of good engagement through it. But also, just to point out one thing as well, is that the majority of the benefit and the majority of the value that listeners get out of this podcast is primarily down to the quality of the guests, right? Because I was very conscious when I started this podcast that I could just do like me talking, and I wasn't sure anyone would listen to that because I'm just some guy. Like I didn't have like a big profile before any of this. I'm not that big now, but it's a little bit bigger, I guess. But what I mean is that I very much decided that the biggest benefit that we could give back to the community was getting really good people on the other side of the microphone and then asking them really good questions or as best questions as I can and trying to get good answers out of them. But all of the benefit and the reasons to listen aren't really me. I do other things where maybe I speak at webinars where I try and give content, but the majority of the great stuff that you get out of these chats are very much in the realms of the guests themselves.
So people from different parts of the world and from different professions will participate in your show.
Yeah. So I've had a few product managers from Nigeria join. I've had some people from India as well join in. Obviously, loads of people from America because there's a lot of tech over in America. So I have a few people from Silicon Valley, all over Europe, some from Australia and New Zealand. There's probably loads of countries that I'm forgetting as well. Canada, I should probably shout out to as well because I had a few Canadians on as well. So, yeah, I think one of the things that has been really interesting and exciting, apart from obviously getting all these great guests, is seeing in the stats that there are people all over the world listening to it. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not like I've got 100,000 listeners in Kenya or something like that, but just seeing the occasional pocket in, say, Kenya or through Africa, out across Asia, into India, like it's just it feels like a very international podcast, even if the majority are still very much European, UK, and US, because that's where the majority of, I think, of the big tech companies and the sort of the big product cultures are. But it is really good to see the spread.
So you also mentioned that diversity and leadership. So tell me your contribution to the world through your podcast about diversity and leadership. What you did through this podcast and what your guest, all the people who came to your show gave to the world through your podcast.
Yeah, so if we're talking about diversity specifically, I mean, I think one of the things that I try to do, and with varying success, is to speak to people from everywhere. So either from different cultures, from different parts of the world, and to try to and different types of company and different types of the world as well. So to really not just have like a bunch of people that look quite similar to me coming on and talking about stuff, because there's a lot of white tech dudes in the world, and some of them have really good stories, and that's fine. I definitely want to talk to some of them, but I don't want to talk to all of them. I do want to talk to people from other cultures. I do want to talk to people from other backgrounds. I'm very keen to have as close to possible a 50-50 split between men and women, for example, to make sure that voices are heard. And also, there are a lot of really important stories to be told in the world of tech. We all know that tech has a diversity problem. Certainly in the West, I don't know how it is everywhere else, but like in every single country. But like, there's not been a single country or person from a single country that I've spoken to where they say that this is just okay. So enabling people to come on and tell their story, but at the same time not forcing them to tell a story about something that they don't want to talk about. So, for example, I don't want every episode with a female product manager to be all about women's rights and women in tech, because some people really want to talk about that, and I absolutely want to talk to those people about that. But some people want to talk about other things that are important to them instead. And I think it's the laziest thing in the world for every single podcast interview with a woman to end up talking to them about, well, what's it like to be a woman in tech? And it's like, well, this is what it's like to be a woman in tech. I keep getting asked what it's like to be a woman in tech. And I think it's very much about making sure that people that you get on, you want to have a diversity of experience, a diversity of background, and diversity of everything, but you don't want to force that then to mean every single conversation with them is something that they don't want to talk about. It's very much about enabling them to tell their stories, and hopefully then sharing those stories with enough people that they can start to see things in a different way. Do I think that I've solved the problem of diversity in product? 0% chance of that. But every little step helps, I think. And if you can help to change anyone's mind even a little bit, then I think that's a useful story to tell.
So you said you did 80 episodes in very less time.
Yeah. So yeah, it's been a while. It's been a long journey of editing and copying and pasting bits of audio around. I mean, again, I think that it kind of goes very up and down. Like there have been some weeks where I've done like 5 interviews in a week, as in recording 5 interviews in a week. Now, I don't know how often you record your stuff, but at the same time, 5 interviews in a week. There was one that I did 3 in a day. That's a lot to do. And then there's this whole problem about, well, I want to make sure that they're released in a reasonable amount of time. I feel bad if they have to wait too long before they come out, because they have a story to tell. That story needs to come out. I don't want them waiting for a very long time. So yeah, there's a lot of obviously promotional stuff that I have to do. There's a lot of actually booking the guests. There's a lot of preparing the content, preparing the questions and preparing the guides and everything like that. And then there's a lot of editing afterwards and sequencing. So yeah, this is why I say it's not just a hobby, because it takes up far too much time to be a hobby. But the good thing is, at least, is that it doesn't take, I don't have to like go and work on an oil rig or something to do this. I can sit in my living room doing it on my laptop, maybe watching TV at the same time. It's not like it's not hard labor, put it that way, but it's definitely a lot of work.
So what are the user experience of the product of your podcast?
What is the user experience? What should they expect? Or
what presently you are getting? You did 80 plus episodes, and what are
yes.
their words about your work?
Well, a lot of people will be very complimentary about the intro. So I always like to introduce the guests, and I introduce them. I put a little bit of thought into the introductions, trying to make it a little bit funny, or at least funny in the sense of an introduction. I'm not a stand-up comedian, but I like to kind of make people feel welcome and kind of come up with as funny an intro as I can. Some people seem to think that that's a really nice touch, so that's kind of become a bit of a trademark. And I think another person is defined me as very cynically British, so very cynical. So like, I guess the thing is, because I'm not like a person who's trying to sell things or trying to use this to get a job or trying to do anything. I'm just me, so I can be as open and honest as I want on these podcasts. And I can be as cheeky or as not offensive, but I don't have to be like what's the word? I don't have to be all kind of, oh hello, I can be me, and I can say things that maybe other people wouldn't say because they want to be friends with the person that they're saying it about or whatever. It's like, it's definitely not like it's still a very friendly podcast, but I like to kind of have a certain sense of humor and a certain kind of feeling of fun, even though you're talking about kind of work and kind of sort of, I mean, it's not, work isn't fun, right? Like, you're talking about work stuff. It's not a comedy, but it's definitely got a nice attitude to it, in my opinion.
So it's not that easy to do a podcast. The job, the full time job that you are doing is completely different from what you are doing, because you have to prepare what to talk and what not to talk. At the
Yes.
same time, you have to see the time, and you have to be on time for the guest, and you have to create content
Yep.
which makes people to understand very easily,
Yep.
and you're talking with the people who with whom you never met, and
Yep.
that's really you have to have a very open mind in order to connect and frame the questions, and
Yep.
talk based on the answers that they are giving. So it's really a risk for you every time, because you have to be very conscious. You have to use your senses very effectively in order to create that content, and you have to be very uh, focused. So how
Yep.
you're managing this, because this is like a job. You're saying that you're
Yep.
not making money from this, but you have to work like you are going to get money from this. So how?
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, this is a job for some people, right? Like, some people, like, podcast production is a job, the audio podcast editing is a job. Finding guests and booking guests is a job. So these are all actual jobs that people do. They obviously do them for podcasts that have way more listeners and actually make money and have to worry about advertising and stuff. So that's different. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it is a lot of work. And I think also, interestingly for me, it's not like I was ever a particularly good. I've always kind of felt very introverted as a person. I'm not like a person that can just open up a conversation with anyone. It takes a lot of effort for me to do that. And I think that what this has helped me to do over time is really sharpen up those skills. Like you say, being able to open up a conversation with someone and just really talk about anything very easily. Now, that was not something I could do maybe 2 years ago. It's something that you learn. And also learning, for example, how to not go and make loads of stupid noises when you're talking and stuff. These are things that, if I listen back to the first few episodes, I mean, I always classify it as like Simpsons season one, like when Homer Simpson was drawn differently and his voice wasn't right, because they were still finding their way. And it's the same for me. It's like, yeah, you go back and you listen to some of the early episodes and they're not as polished, and maybe my questions weren't as good, and maybe my production quality wasn't as good. But every single one of those was a step along the way. And I don't think you get to doing 85, 86 episodes of a podcast without learning a little bit about how to communicate, a little bit about how your voice sounds. There's no surprises for me now how my voice sounds. Like, a lot of people will sit there and say, I have no idea I sound like that. So no, I know exactly how I sound. And that is a thing, because you start to analyze yourself, you start to understand a little bit more about maybe some of the things that you didn't know that you did that are actually quite annoying for other people. So, like, you can then start to correct that behavior. So I'd actually recommend for anyone, record yourself doing something, like talking about a thing, and see how you sound. It's not going to be pleasant. You're going to hate listening to it, but at the same time, if you can step away from that hatred of listening to it, you can really start to understand some of the things that you're saying or doing, or behaviors that you have, which are actually really frustrating for people, and then you can start thinking about moving them.
So product management, leadership, and diversity. So all these interconnected things which will be there in a company. So is this only for technical people or non-technical people? Your podcast is for.
It's a good question. I mean, I'd say that, I mean, I'd argue that even technical or digital products, you shouldn't need to be like a hardcore technical person to product manage a product, even no matter how complicated it is, because your job is to understand what people need, what problems you're going to solve, how you might solve them in a scalable way. But you've got software developers to develop the software. Now, the podcast is listed under technology category. I keep thinking about whether it should go into business instead, because a lot of the conversations we have on the podcast aren't about building software as such. I mean, that's there, but it's more about engaging with stakeholders and engaging with the business and the founders of the business and engaging with customers and engaging with markets. So a lot of that is a lot more business oriented than technical. But at the same time, do I think that, for example, my mum would want to listen to this podcast? I would say almost certainly not. It's not like a mass market general interest podcast. It's very focused around people that are building some kind of product. And I think that's fine because that's the world that I inhabit. I keep thinking, should I maybe expand it out and not just be talking about very specific product management things? And maybe one day I will. Maybe it'll be more of a one night in technology or something like that. But for me at the moment, it feels like I'm getting a lot of value out of having these conversations. And I think that there's enough of an audience out there for these conversations to be really valid.
So at last, tell about your podcast to the technology people who are watching and listening to our conversation from anywhere on this planet.
Like one last phrase for me to say.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you should absolutely listen to it if you have any interest in how to build products, digital products generally. But if you have any interest in how to build products, if you have any interest in effective working across teams and trying to understand what other people care about, so what technical people care about, what business people care about, what customers care about, I think it's absolutely worth listening to some of the people on the podcast, sharing some of their stories and some of their thoughts and some of their advice, because it should make you a better product manager or product developer.
So I'll put your podcast link in the description of this video. People who finds our video on YouTube can connect with you and can listen and can gain knowledge from all the guests who are coming to your show.
And I'll absolutely link back to you as well, so we can start to push some people across and they can listen to some of your guests as well, because I see you've got quite the collection.
So what do you say as a person who is into software industry for a long time and the product management and understanding leadership and coding, and you understand diversity. So what do you say about my videos? Have you seen any videos of mine on YouTube?
No, I was going to watch. There was one that you had with an army guy or something, I think, recently, which came on, which I really wanted to watch, but I didn't get a chance to yet. But that's definitely on my list of things to watch. It looks like a really interesting topic, so definitely keen to start looking through some of those.
So what do you say? You saw the overview, me talking with different country people who are into different professions. As a software engineer, I don't need to talk with people who are authors, like police officers, army officers, but I'm doing this. What do you think? My software, my technology background, the educational qualifications that I have, do you think that is working for me to make this possible?
I think it's really interesting and really useful and really valid to step outside of your immediate bubble, right? And arguably that's something that I should do more now with my podcast, so to not just be talking to people just working in the same niche, but maybe diversifying a little bit more, not just diversifying with gender and race and cultural backgrounds, but diversifying just types of industry. So that's definitely something on my mind. I think what you're doing is interesting because, again, with your background, you're talking to different people about different things, and some of those things may be things that are not things that you know about, which is good because it means that you can help then share that knowledge with your peer group, and it becomes again more of a general interest content creation piece then, right? So you're not just sitting there telling the same story every week about the same types of things, but you're starting to share really interesting perspectives. And I think how do you find it? I mean, do you find that opening your eyes to a lot of new experiences? How valuable has it been for you?
Yeah, obviously, I'm as a person who is working on a software or who understands the mechanism of the software and to know the output of the software, it is very important for me to understand the communication between different people and how the I understood about computer networks, which was there in my graduation. The computers are connected with each other. The information transfers between that and how the data centers, how the entire tech industry is working. So I think human got this thought by understanding the communication between human beings and understanding the emotions of
Hmm.
people and understanding the connectivity, the relationship between people. I think human got this thought. Uh, uh, and then he decided to create some devices and transmission mediums and transferring mediums and everything the communication. He needed a communication and he wants to establish. He don't want people to get disconnected, so that's why there is an all these social networks, Facebook, all the whatever is there in the internet today, only because of uh, which is for human beings, which is ultimately it is for human beings. So I thought as a software guy, it is very important for me to understand what human beings think, so that I can put in the user interface of the software that I'm working on, and I can understand the functionalities, what they like and what they don't like. And if I understand, like you said, diversity, so I want to know the user experience of people, not only about a website or a mobile app or anything. I want to talk about the general things like
Yeah.
water, fire, the natural resources in the world. I
Yeah.
talk with scientists, so it's completely environmental scientists. So he also said how the data centers, our IT industry data centers, how they give their data to our IT people in order to put our the storage things safe. So all this, everything in the world is interconnected. So
Yeah.
uh, so I want to talk with everybody so that I can improve the technology, that the technical things better. So that's why the reason this diversity. So I learned a lot. People are talking a lot, but at the end of the day, everybody is a human being and
Yeah.
everybody is connecting with something which is
Yeah.
common.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that that point is really valid around like trying to understand things from as many different places as possible. And yeah, no, I think it's a really good thing to do and to cast your net wide. So definitely going to be spending some time looking at some of those conversations and seeing if I can get some inspiration myself as well.
So can I put this video and audio clip on my YouTube channel with your permission?
Absolutely, yeah. No, no worries. I don't think I said anything too stupid, but obviously feel free to correct me if I have.
And also, can I put this audio and video clip on my social media, internet, podcast, website,
You
everywhere
can
with your
put this all,
permission?
wherever you want. I have no shame.
Thank you, Jason. Keep going, keep doing what you love, and I'm
Yeah, you
sure
too.
your
No,
product,
seriously. Let's keep
yeah,
in touch.
your product management knowledge and the thoughts that you're saying through your guests and the leadership skills and the diversity qualities that you're saying will should reach more people in the world and should impact more people.
Fingers crossed.
Thanks, sir.
Have a good evening.
Bye.